So many similarities between the first reading and the gospel reading, and they are written probably 800 years apart. And I asked myself, well, gosh, in these readings, what is the interpretive key? And I think it's found in the second reading. St. Paul says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep doing what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me." We could say, keep doing what you have learned and received and heard and seen in the church proper, in the teachings of the church. In the first reading, we hear about Isaiah singing about this vineyard that he's known, and the landowner chooses a piece of property and clears it. He erects a tower, a wine press. He puts a hedgerow around it. These were spiny types of hedgerows, so the boars and the thieves couldn't get through. And he picks the choicest vines. And then something impossible happens. The vines produce wild grapes. Wild grapes are sour, they're small, they have a lot of seeds. In other parts of Scripture, it says the children, meaning the people of God, have eaten wild grapes and their teeth are on edge, which means their teeth have been sharpened. They have now become vicious. It's impossible for choice vines to produce wild grapes. So obviously this is symbolic of something else, that the vineyard wasn't tended properly by the tenant farmers. And in Jesus' time, the tenant farmers were very numerous because the land was occupied by the Romans, and so oftentimes the wealthy landowners would leave and have the property taken care of by tenant farmers, and then they would send somebody on behalf of the tenant farmer to collect the produce or the income from the land. And we hear the same thing. The land is cleared, a tower is erected. Why? Because we have to look over the valleys nearby to see if anyone is coming to steal what was there. And wine press is made after the grapes are harvested, pressed, and then later made into wine. And choicest vines are picked. And so the landowner sends these representatives. So the tenant farmers are the religious leaders of the day. The property, the vine, people of God. The messengers, representatives of the landowner, are the prophets. The landowner is God the Father. And he sent wave and after wave of his representatives to collect what belongs to him. I've given you this great gift. Now produce an income, produce an increase, and bring it to me. But the tenant farmers were disobedient and not doing what the landowner wanted, symbolic of the religious leaders of the time. It's really kind of sad. And then he goes and he sends these messengers, these representatives, the prophets, people like Jeremiah, people like Elijah, people like Micah. All these representatives go And I mean, if you look at the history of the prophets, more of them were killed than were not, and they were killed by their own people. He sends them, they throw them out of the vineyard, they stone them, they kill them, they beat them. Why? Well, in those days, if you had an absentee landowner and the heir comes and you off him, you get rid of him, sometimes nobody would follow up and the land would become property of the tenant farmers. Theft, really. In the parable that Jesus tells, now we are still in the precincts of the temple, and he's telling these series of parables within earshot of the Pharisees and the scribes and other people who do not like him. Jesus, they don't like him. So he tells them this parable, and he says, certainly they will respect my son, the landowner. I'll send my own son. Now, St. John Chrysostom says, no, the father is not foolish. He knows what's going to happen to the son. It is more of, they should respect my son, but they don't. And they said, well, here he is. Let's kill him, and maybe this property will become ours. So they throw him out of the vineyard, a symbol of Jesus being crucified outside the walls of Jerusalem, and put him to death. And the question is asked, what do you think the landowner is going to do to those tenant farmers? And it does not end well. It does not end well at all. It's very symbolic of our days, and it can be somewhat abstract. What do we do to avoid this happening to us? How do we avoid throwing the son out of our own vineyard? And how are we to navigate these times when so much confusion is going on out in the world? I mean, I just was reading a little bit about what's going on in Israel right now and the missiles being launched from the Gaza Strip. And then we hear a little bit about the Armenian genocide, and I have a goddaughter down in Guatemala, and the whole country there is in a state of tumult because of the elections and possible election fraud. What are we to do in these tumultuous times? Again, we focus on being converted by that which is true, that which is honorable, that which is just, that which is pure, that which is lovely, that which is gracious. We do what we have learned over these years as followers of Christ, and we find goodness in that. Where do I go to find this good, true, and beautiful? Many places. Here's a few. I'll read them all to you. Friends, the Baltimore Catechism is still relevant, and it's especially good for children. The question and answer format is beautiful. Is it a little dated? Yeah, so is the Catholic Church. I can find what's good, what's just, what's lovely, what is right in this, and for my kids. Now, this is a Catholic Study Bible. This edition is not available anymore. You can probably find used editions on Amazon. But you don't have to have this particular Catholic Study Bible. There are others. But if I'm looking for what is good and true and just, if you aren't reading Scripture, you got to start. Maybe start with one of our Scripture classes. We have several, including one on Tuesday night that meets right here at about 7 o'clock. Ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Jesus Christ. That's what St. Jerome says. We just celebrated his feast day a few days ago. How am I going to not fall into the pit of error? If I know a great deal of what's in here, I'm going to know what's good, true, beautiful, just, lovely. And then the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I think Father Billy Costco said that this was a revolution in the church in the early 90s to produce this one-volume summary of what the church teaches, relying on so much of her teaching in other documents, the Second Vatican Council documents, the documents of St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, and other and popes from the past and documents from the past, all the way up to the present day. Beautiful, beautiful work. Is it a little bit on the scholarly side? Oh yeah. What it was written for was for bishops, but then it got in the hands of the layperson. I remember, again, we're talking about what's good and just and true and beautiful. I remember one of the now priests telling me, you know, now in the seminarian had the one-volume issue of what the church teaches, and then, of course, all these great footnotes that lead you to other documents. But he's in the classroom, the seminary's in the classroom, and if he heard something goofy from the professor, he could say, "Hey, Father, I don't get what you just said, because you said this. Did I hear that right? But the catechism says something else." You want to see Father flip out? What is good? What is just? What is true? What is beautiful? Friends, in these tumultuous times, utilize these tools. Utilize these tools. If you're an adult and you like the Baltimore Catechism, more power to you. It's good material. It's good. Find what works for you that's solidly Catholic and keep doing that. Keep doing what you have learned and focus on these things. Friends, that's how we will make it through these tumultuous times. Friends, that is the way in which we follow Christ to where we don't accidentally or purposely throw him out of the vineyard.